Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Puck Talk Live. We're going to have a lot to talk about. The Laval Rocket hiring a new goalie coach. Again, we're going to look at some trade rumors and things that just aren't going to happen. And of course, there's the Battle Center buzz. Welcome to Puck Talk Montreal Live. Hey gang, Costa here. Thanks for tuning in this Friday night. Hope you get in on the chat and we start chatting up a storm. There's a lot to talk about. The Montreal Canadiens, of course, on the Olympic break. Just a few players going in. As Tony Tardrew chimes in, we're doing fine, Tony. Now, here's the thing about the Olympic break. The Canadiens go into it 4-0-1. Beyond that, last night, the Buffalo Sabres lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Montreal Canadiens are firmly in second place in the Atlantic Division, 6th overall in the NHL. And that's where the title of the thumbnail comes from, Beyond Expectations, because who the hell thought the Canadiens would be here this late in the season, right? There's barely 2 months to go, give or take, after the Olympic break is done. And the Canadiens are sitting pretty well in the middle of playoff contention. We're not going to say they're locking it up because the Atlantic Division is just so freaking tight. But I got to tell you, it's just been a whirlwind when it comes to Montreal. And, you know, Tony, I'm going to get to what you're saying right away because I don't want to wait until later. I don't care about the snubs, to be honest. The fact that Lane Hudson and Cole Caulfield aren't going to the Olympics, it's a choice that Bill Guerin had to make because there's just so much talent. And you can't afford to have the same guys on your team over and over again. Will Quinn Hughes be better than Lane Hudson? That remains to be seen. But overall, there were so many different players that Bill Guerin could have chose from. I mean, who's to say that he didn't make the right choice? When it comes to Cole Caulfield, that in and of itself is a little bit of a screw job because when you've got a guy who's got 30-plus goals on the season, you can't afford to leave him on the sidelines. But we'll get to the chat a little bit later on in the show. Right now, I want to talk about a couple of things that happened just recently that are really important as far as the Montreal Canadiens are concerned. That is, of course, the hiring of Ilya Ijov as the new goaltending coach in Laval, because after all, that's going to affect the development of one Jacob Fowler. Now, the thing about Ijov is that he's got a massive resume when it comes to being a goaltending coach. He's not just some guy that picked randomly. He's been involved in professional goalie programs I think since 2014, if I'm not mistaken. He runs his own development sessions in the Montreal area. He's worked at Concordia. He speaks French, English, and Russian, and he's worked with goaltenders for both North America and Europe. So he's got a lot as far as experience is concerned. There's no real list of goaltenders that he's worked with that we can look for because I looked online and there really wasn't anything there because a lot of the kids that he has worked with up until this point really haven't been at the professional level. This is going to be his first kick at the can as actually being a goalie coach at the AHL. So it remains to be seen whether or not he's going to be good for Jacob Fowler or whether he's going to be bad. But here's the reason why Ijov fits in Laval. Number one, he was a pro goaltender himself, not only in the KHL, but he's got North American experience as well. He's very good at teaching goalies how to refine their game under pressure, which is something that we've seen lacking not only from the Canadiens goaltenders, but of course the goaltenders at the American Hockey League. He's very strong on getting goaltenders in the right mindset, their mental structure as far as the game's concerned. That's really important. And the other part of it is he's got an innate ability to do something that a lot of goalie coaches can't do. They could bridge the gap between the North American style of goaltending and European style. And while a lot of people don't think that's very important, it's huge. Is that better? Yeah, it is. So I don't know why that happens. I'm gonna have to look into it. The sound just disappears during the show, so I apologize. Anyways, getting back to it, what I was talking about e-jobs. I don't know how far I got. If you guys can tell me where I was at. Tony, was I talking about post play? Was I talking about rebound control? Where was I? Because I guess I'll just start over on that point. I was talking about e-job, right? Before the sound decided to disappear. And so here's the thing about e-job, bridging the gap. Bridging the gap. Happy Super Bowl. Ugh. No, it wasn't accidentally unplugged, actually. My sound card decided to take a break during the show. But anyway, okay, we're talking, bridging the gap between European and North American styles. That's where I was. Thank you very much. Okay, as I was talking about, he's good at that. But there's a lot of other things that he's good at as well. Number one, he's very good at teaching the guys to use a hybrid style against the post. As I mentioned a million times during the show, I've talked about my preference of sealing the post by standing up as opposed to being down in the reversed vertical horizontal, where you have one pad down, one pad up. That's the reference to the way the style is. And that's where we see goaltenders allow goals up near their ears, over their shoulder, and they look pretty bad, right? Ejov is the type of goalie coach that teaches the hybrid style, where if the puck is in behind the net, he's okay with them being down in the RVH in order to be able to move laterally from one side of the post to the other when the puck is nowhere near a scoring chance, for example. But then once the player comes out beyond the goal line, he wants them up and sealing the post. So I love the fact that the Canadiens have a goalie coach that's ready to teach them that. He's also extremely good at teaching rebound control. And I'm not talking about pushing the rebounds to corners after shots come in. I'm talking about the age-old art of the puck hitting the goaltender and dying in front of him. And since the butterfly was implemented back when Patrick Waugh made it popular in the 1980s, prior to that, a lot of goaltenders prided themselves on the puck dying in front of them. Some of you who are my age might remember Pelle Lindbergh. Lindbergh was a master at the puck hitting his pads and just dying in front of him so he could smother a rebound. There's a reference from my friend Lou out in Philly and the guy that does the Defend Philly podcast. And so it's important for the goaltenders to be able to deaden that puck and smother it when their team, especially, as I mentioned during the second period, is in trouble. So he's going to do that. Another thing that he's really strong at, and this is something that we've seen through the goaltenders in Montreal, where we've said oftentimes during games they have happy feet. He's really good at teaching them patience in the sense that before the shot comes in, get square, stay square, and don't move. If the player moves, you move with him, but you don't get happy feet, right? Having happy feet and having your feet move around constantly while a player is getting ready to shoot isn't a strength for a goaltender. It's a weakness because oftentimes players catch you off balance and it takes you a half second longer to drop into your butterfly if you have to, or to react to a shot. Having that pre-shot patience is crucial to a goaltender. So again, another thing that he teaches them freely. And then the other part of his coaching is the ability to teach a mental reset after goals are scored, especially bad goals. And we know that guys like Montembeault, all this season especially, has had the propensity to give up bad goals. Dobish has done it as well, especially letting in goals that he should have stopped early. And so allowing those bad goals gets into a goalie's head because he sits there and he thinks, what could I have done differently? Why didn't I get there? What did I have to do different? And so there it is, right? If the Canadiens have that type of teacher in the American Hockey League, it's only going to help them further along as the players develop to the National Hockey League level. So hiring Ilya Ejov is an important step for the Canadiens because it's also going to allow Marco Marciano to focus specifically on working with Jakub Dobish and Sam Montembeault. We know that Montembeault needs work. His fundamentals are way off. Dobish, he needs some work as well in the sense that he needs to be much more structured early in hockey games. To me, it looks like his focus is off. And that's why he's allowing those early goals. If he was going to make good saves early, then it would be better for the Canadiens. Although their goaltending situation, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, isn't nearly as bad as it was early on in the season. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about David Reinbacher. Now, Reinbacher, everybody's talking about Reinbacher in the sense that, oh, he's injury prone, oh, this, oh, that. Listen, he's been out day to day with what they call an upper body injury. His cuckoo clock got rung on a hit behind the net when he had his head down. That's basically what happened. And he was concussed. And he was out of the lineup. To me, that's not an injury. To me, that's a result of a hockey play, right? Because it can happen to anybody, right? When you're ill-prepared to take a hit, whether your head's up, head's down, you're along the boards in the middle of the ice, if you're not braced for impact, you're going to rattle the brain. And if you rattle the brain, you're concussed and you get out. They've had him out now for almost 2 weeks. He's scheduled to play tomorrow. David Reinbacher is an extremely important part of the Montreal Canadiens moving forward because, after all, he's a right-shot defenseman, and we know that the Canadiens need to have strength on that side of the ice, especially if we want to continue using Lane Hutson on the left-hand side where he is at his absolute best. So it's going to be important for Reinbacher to make that step next year to the National Hockey League. When he's healthy, he's among the best defensemen in the American Hockey League, bar none. He's good in his own zone. He contributes offensively, makes good first passes, everything the Montreal Canadiens need from an NHL caliber defenseman. He's ready. He just has to get through the end of the season and make his mark in the playoffs to be able to get up here next year for development camp and eventually make it to the main roster, which next season is almost guaranteed to happen. Save him breaking another hand, for lack of a better thing. Now, we've got those two bits of news out of the way. Time for us to get to the Bell Center Buzz, my favorite part of this live show. Now, the Buzz, very, very simply, it's all about the latest news. And so, as we get to the news, the first thing we want to talk about is where the Canadiens are vis-a-vis the standings right now, right? They're checking. Where are they at? Well, here's the thing. They're number 2 in the Atlantic, as I mentioned before. They're firmly right now in a playoff position, although, as I mentioned, the Atlantic division is very tight. That could very well change. They're among the best scoring teams in the league. And that's not something we've been able to say about the Montreal Canadiens for the past few years. So let's just be happy at the fact that they're there. It's been a long time coming, right? And so for the Canadiens to be where they are right now, I think we need to be extremely, patient as far as this rebuild is concerned. And I know you're going to say, the rebuild's over. We've got to go win now. No. Okay, guys, you may disagree with me, and that's fine, but the rebuild's not over because you've still got pieces coming in. You've still got Fowler. You've still got Hage. You've still got Reinbacher. In a couple of years, you're going to have Zorowski. You're going to have, I forget Bogdan's last name, but you've got all these talents. Bryce Pickford is another one who stood out this year in the Western Hockey League. Can you imagine having all those players in the Canadiens lineup and then making a push for a cup? At that point, you're sitting pretty, right? And therein lies part of the problem with all the discussions going on right now. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit later. But the Canadiens also have something else that they haven't had in the better part of a decade, a positive goal differential. Why? Because they're scoring more goals. Whether it's at 5-on-5 on the power play, of course, the power play being where it is extremely important for the Canadian success. That goes without saying. And there's one thing that they have done, which they haven't done in the past, like last season, it's winning close games. So when you take a look at the Canadiens from top to bottom this season, there is no doubt that they've been absolutely fantastic to start the year. And so we've gone 2/3 through, and the Canadiens are almost at the promised land. I think that the amount of points they talked about to make the playoffs is 93. The Canadiens are 72. They're 21 points away. Okay, that's 21 points away. That's 10 wins, basically. So all they need is another 10 wins to clinch a playoff spot. When was the last time we could actually say that in the month of February about the Canadiens? I can't remember because it's been a while. So let's take that, turn it into a positive for a second. Now, next up is, of course, how real are the Canadiens' playoff chances? And as I mentioned, they're 10 wins away from a playoff spot. They're extremely real. An 80% chance to make the playoffs as it stands. Think about where they were just last season in December. No, last in the league, nowhere near a playoff spot. And all of a sudden, everything turned around, right? They're second with 72 points in the division. That is the only person that was expecting this. And yeah, I'm going to pat myself on the back again. But if you can go back and look preseason what I said about the Canadiens, I said that I think they're going to be fighting for the division title because of the fact that the Leafs were going to take an absolute tank job after Marner leaves. And that's exactly what's happened. So the other part of that and how real their playoff chances are, if you look at the graphic, is 61% of teams that have 72 plus points in February make the playoffs. The Canadiens are right there. So that also bodes well. And like the thing is, the battle for the wild card in the Eastern Conference is really tight. I mean, Buffalo is right there, so are the Bruins. So it's extremely important that the Canadiens continue to win hockey games, right? As I said, 10 more wins almost guarantees you a playoff spot. So another positive to look at for the Canadiens, there's not much when you look at this team that you can construe as negative, right? Because after all, they're well beyond being in the mix like last year. So why can't we be happy with what we have right now and look forward to what's coming is the question I give to you. Now, how far can this lineup go? It depends on whether or not they're healthy, right? Doc Suzuki and Caulfield have 138 points combined. Now, of course, Doc gone for the majority of the season with a broken foot, but he's playing the same way he did before his foot injury. So if he can stay healthy and remain relevant on the first line, there's no telling what the Canadiens could do. And there's more to come. And I'm not talking trade deadline here. There's absolutely more to come when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens. I don't think that this roster is done changing, for lack of a better term. And I'm not talking about them bringing in different bodies, getting people gone, sending guys down to the minors. That's not what I'm talking about. Every player on a hockey team, as they develop, is exactly like a butterfly. And I don't want to sound corny, but it's the absolute truth. You start out as one thing and you end up another based on the coaching of your team, right? Now, when you look at the coaching staff of the Montreal Canadiens, tell me if there's a player that you can absolutely 100% say has been underdeveloped by the current coaching staff at the NHL level. You look at where Slafkovsky is. You look at how Caulfield's turned into a 200-foot player. You look at Caden Gooley and how good he is on defense. You can say that the staff has kind of failed Arbor Xhekaj and Jaden Struble just a little bit. But beyond that, there's not much more that you could fault this coaching staff for. So their identity is being a fast-striking team. The core is extremely young, and they have a lot of depth options. So when you take a look at those components and what it takes to win in the playoffs, the Canadiens could go far. The only question is, can they stand up versus the physicality that the playoffs bring forward? That is the million-dollar question. That's something we're going to see in April, almost guaranteed. Another thing that's changed is the goaltending and some of the roster decisions the Canadiens need to make that's coming up right now. Obviously, the Canadiens decided to send Fowler back down. I don't think he's done at the NHL level this year, right? We'll see what happens with Montembeault and Dobish, but I think he's going to be back. Let's just say that. Because Montembeault's still trying to find his game, right? He did play extremely well in their last game, and Dobish is still emerging as a talent. He's still got work to do in his game. So, and then, of course, you've got Fowler, who's not on this graphic, who, in and of himself, is an emerging talent at the American Hockey League level. So there's a lot of good happening right now in the goaltending position. It's nowhere near where it was early in the season or how bad it was. It's a lot more stable now, and that's an important thing to think about here. I know it's not where we want it to be, right? Obviously, but it's getting there, and that's the part we have to look at. And then, of course, there's all this talk about the trade deadline that's coming up, right? And that's one part of this show that I want to talk about that's really important. There's a lot of talk about Patrik Laine. Somebody who I will not name said that he expects him to be traded between February 22nd and February 26th. I checked with my sources today, and that's complete bull. Why? Number one, there is interest in Laine from other teams, right? But they haven't called the Canadiens about it at all. Why? He hasn't played. So how can you trade for somebody that you want to help contribute to your team? For example, if it's a team that's looking to make a deep run and wants some extra goals, or whether it's a team that's looking to make a playoff push, wants some extra goals. So they're looking at a guy like Patrik Laine as an example, as a possible option. How can you trade for him when he hasn't hit the ice yet with his team? He's played 5 games this year, doesn't have a goal, and you want to go out and bring him on your team to help score goals. If that makes sense to anybody out there, tell me now, put it in the chat, explain to me how that makes sense. You cannot expect a player to be traded based on his past. We've learned that with other players, right? When the Canadiens went out and got players, Jonathan Drouin, where he produced in Tampa Bay, but then came to Montreal and was a complete dud. There is a fine line between what you've done then and what you've done for me lately. And so if Patrik Laine doesn't have a sample size to show other teams, his trade value is 0. Not to mention, despite what everybody else is telling you, the Canadiens are not shopping him. That's been confirmed by more than one of my sources. So they can say what they want. A lot of people, they turn around and they say things just to make it clickbait. I'm telling you, he is not being moved. The only way that Patrik Laine will get moved is if a team decides to take on his cap to get to the floor because they're dumping people. Like the San Jose Sharks did in getting Carey Price's contract earlier this year. They did it to be able to get to the salary cap floor and to make sure that if they moved anybody, they didn't end up below it. And that could very well be the reason why they trade for Laine. But that's a very big if. A team that's looking to make the playoffs is not going to make that move. A lot of those teams don't have salary cap space, despite the fact that they want the player. So they need to dump somebody on their current roster, who they want to keep, by the way, in order to pick up another piece that they want. That makes no sense to me. So let's leave that alone. Laine is going to come back and he's going to play. Where? We can discuss that on another show. Then there's the return of Alex Newhook. Everybody's saying that we need to trade to strengthen the second line. Time out here. We're forgetting that the second line with Alex Newhook on it was just as, if not more effective than when Slafkovsky decided to join that second line and he came down from the first. Could you imagine if Newhook comes back and he's playing at the same level he did before his injury? And then Slafkovsky gets to go back to the first line and be that physical presence that we want for Suzuki and Caulfield? Just think about that going into the playoffs. What do we need to make a trade for? Exactly. If it was a defenseman, I have no problem with that. But there's not a single person out there that's talking about D. We're hearing names like Ryan O'Reilly. We're hearing names like Jordan Kyrou. We're hearing names like, Jordan Binnington even about goaltending. But we're not hearing anything about defensemen. That's not necessarily a bad thing because, as I mentioned, you've got Reinbacher coming up. There's depth there in the Canadiens organization. Adam Engstrom is another guy who I didn't mention before who could very well find a spot at the National Hockey League next season. But that's a question for next year. But why are you going to go out and trade for a piece that you're going to bring in? You just went out and got Noah Dobson to complement Lane Hudson, right? You've got Kane Gooley. You've got Mike Matheson signed to a long-term deal. Where are you going out and getting another defenseman to add to your cap where you don't really have more than maybe $1.2 million at the deadline? Guys, I get the excitement and I understand it, right? And I appreciate it because when a trade happens, I get excited about it too. But you got to look at it logically. There's a limit to what you can do. The Canadiens only have 23 contracts. Why do you think they sent down, what's his name? Sammy Blais. They're going to have to send somebody else on waivers. Who will it be? Is it going to be Bolduc or is it going to be Texier? One of them is going to be going down in order to make room for Newhook when he's ready to come back. And those are the questions that Kent Hughes has to ask himself. Do I stand pat because basically Alex Newhook is a new component coming back? He's going to be fresh, ready to go. Same thing for Laine. He's going to be fresh, ready to go. Much like he was when he came back from his injury from the knee that Paré put on him. How effective was he then? These are all things everybody needs to think about. There's no need to make a move. You're not going for a cup. That goes without saying. You're making the playoffs and you're trying to win around here. You want positive progression for your team. Okay, there's no point in the Canadiens making the playoffs and then saying, okay, we're going to lose in the first round again, but it's okay because, we weren't in the wild card this year. That's our positive progression. No. Your positive progression is make the playoffs again, win the first round, and win it from a position of strength, right? That's what you want. That's where you want to be, right? So by and large, don't think the Canadiens are going to make a deal unless it really, really works. And for those of you that are hoping for either Kyrou or even Robert Thomas for that matter, they both have no movement clauses. Do you honestly think that's not going to cost the Canadiens prospects in order to get those guys to Montreal? And I'm telling you, it's not going to be a low-level prospect like a Philip Meshar or a Joshua Roy. It's going to be a Reinbacher or a Hage or an Engstrom or even a Zarovsky that they're going to be asking for. What do you do then? Do you make the deal? Obviously not. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. It's not about what we wish for. And that's why I don't delve into rumors, because that's all they are. Until such time as there's any traction, I don't talk about things like that. I don't want to. Why? Because it gives all of us false expectations. It's fun to think about it. You see mock trades on Facebook all the time, right? And what do those mock trades bring you? A little bit of fun, a little bit of thought. But most of those mock trades, they're one-sided. They make the Canadiens look fantastic, right? You go out and you get one player and the Canadiens get rid of 3 problematic players and a low-level draft pick. They're not realistic because they don't fit into the salary cap. If this was back in the 80s, 90s, who cares? Yeah, there's no salary cap. Trade away whatever you want. Get back how much salary you want. We're the Canadiens. We print money. It wouldn't matter. But now it's not like that anymore. Yes, the cap's going up. I get that. But do you get that the Canadiens are going to have to re-sign Demidov? Right? Do you get that both Arbor Xhekaj is going to need an RFA deal? The Canadiens decide to keep Kirby Dach, and that's a big if. He's going to need to sign because he's an RFA as well. There's a lot of moving pieces to a hockey team, guys. And it's not about just wanting to get the guys you want, right? The $10 million that the cap's going up next year, that's already on Lane Hutson's contract. It's been dead and buried for next year. Okay? And the next $10 million, it may very well, the majority of that may very well go to Demidov, especially if he wins Rookie of the Year this year. All that has to be factored in. And so let's see what Kent Hughes does, because I believe in him. I believe in him and Jeff Gordon. They're making all the right moves. They're moving according to their plan, and they're not just making moves for the sake of making them to appease people. They're doing it to strengthen the team. And isn't that ultimately what we want? I think it is. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show, and that is the chat. It never gets boring, right? Obviously, I want to thank you guys for letting me know about the audio. I didn't notice that the levels were gone, but I love this part because there's a lot of good banter. Yeah, sometimes we get heated, but the banter's fantastic. So let's get right into it. Where do we go? Let's see. Here, from Ryan Cleary. If the Habs want to be in the playoff spot, they have to start Dobish more, pass to Caulfield and Suzuki to be two-way, and Demidov to be on the first line. Wow. Am I reading that wrong? Let me see that again. So if Habs want to be in a playoff spot, they have to start Dobish more, pass to Caulfield and Nick Suzuki to be two-way, and Demidov to be one first line, defense to offense, the first defensive line. I'm having a hard time with that one with Ryan. Let me add on to that one with your second comment right underneath it where you said we need better defense and improvement on Brendan Gallagher. There's something we need to talk about because I mentioned that Gallagher needed a break from the compressed schedule. And you're all going to say, yeah, the compressed schedule, it happens to every team. But specifically for older players, it's tough. Especially for a guy like Gallagher who goes into all those dirty areas and takes a beating night in, night out. And what have we seen? We've seen a better Brendan Gallagher over the last 3 weeks now that the back-to-backs are gone. So let's just say this. We don't need to get rid of Brendan Gallagher. He's an important part of this hockey club. Moving forward, maybe they look to move him. I don't think they will because he is one of the leaders on this team. When you look at our defense, we don't have to trade for a defenseman. We've mentioned we've got Engstrom and Reinbacher licking their chops to come to Montreal. Think about that top six defense at that point. Matheson, Dobson, Hudson, Gooley, Reinbacher, Engstrom. With Bryce Pickford and Bogdan in the wings. Looks pretty good, right? Pretty stacked. And that's not to say that the Canadiens won't draft more defensemen that can fill in roles further down the line, right? So I don't think we need to go out and get defensemen. What the hell for? As I mentioned, we're not going for a playoff run. If the deal is right, maybe. But by and large, if you take a look at the defense right now, outside of Arbor, Jackeye, and Struble, who are just not getting a chance to play that often, overall, the Canadiens are playing much better, especially man-to-man defense. We complained about it early in the year. Haven't you noticed the last few games the Canadiens' man-to-man defense has gotten better? I have. We haven't seen them chasing pucks. They've been in good defensive position. Yes, they've allowed goals, but a lot of those goals, not necessarily their fault. They don't block a shot. It goes off their body and in, but they're in position to make the right play, right? They're not chasing players around, so they're not vacating areas on the ice that they should be covering. We saw all that early in the season, right? We talked about that when it came to Alex Carrier ad nauseum. Noah Dobson did the same thing, but they're not doing it anymore. And that's encouraging. So I'm not moving defense. Can you imagine bringing in a defenseman now who needs to learn to play man-to-man as opposed to zone? Does that make sense to you? Not to me at all. So I disagree with that. No, my wife didn't unplug me. Thanks, Joe. And yeah, the goalie coaching in Laval, I'm excited to see what that brings up. Let's see here. Nobody tells Lane Hudson what side to play on. Not coming from Aces Andres. That's because they don't want him to be restricted to one side, right? They'd prefer he stay on his strong side. But the thing about Lane Hudson is he's got strength on both sides. He can play the puck on his backhand. Lane Hudson's issue isn't being able to play either side. His issue is timing his pinches when he's on the weak side. Because if you watch him very carefully, a lot of the times when he gives up odd man rushes or a bad pinch, it's because he's playing the right side. And he's coming in along the boards to go retrieve pucks when he shouldn't. He should be backing off. On his strong side, no problem whatsoever. His stick is in the right position because it's on his strong side. He doesn't have a problem with it. But when you're on your backhand on your weak side and you go in on a pinch, you're less likely to make the right play, especially under pressure. So that's the reason why they don't want him to play that side on a regular basis, especially to start on faceoffs. But when gameplay is going on, they don't restrict him to one side of the ice or the other. No coach does that with any defenseman. You take the ice you're given, and normally Hudson will take the ice and he'll do something with it. So we're not talking about him being, restricted to one side or switching sides with his defensive partner. That goes without saying, right? But we are talking about is him being on one side the entire game, especially at faceoffs. Having a player, especially in the defensive zone, on the wrong wing in the defensive zone is a liability. Even in the offensive zone, you could call it that, because a lot of faceoffs in the offensive zone, especially when you're on the right of the faceoff dot. They get pulled back to the right side defenseman. That right side defenseman normally feeds the defenseman in the middle. So if that happens and you've got a defenseman who's on his backhand, you're less likely to have success. They want to have the right kind of defenseman there. So it is what it is. But I'm just saying that's not where they want him to be. And yeah, we don't need to make acquisitions from trades. I agree with that, Andres. I don't disagree whatsoever. Thank you, Montreal MUFC. I never say Bogdan's family name because I screw it up all the time. Konyushkov, and I'm going to get used to saying it. Yeah, you're right about his age, but he's very young right now, right? He's not anywhere near the NHL because he's still got, I think it's one more year on his contract in the KHL or maybe two. But either way, he's developing beautifully in the KHL. So let's just leave it at that, right? If things go sideways, then the Canadiens get involved and watch. We know from what happened with Ivan Demidov that they go when they check things out, right? Especially Nick Bobroff, right? So let's just keep everything at a standstill right now and make sure, you know, the Canadiens continue to play the way they're playing right now because there's no issue with their game whatsoever, in my mind anyway. Let's see here. Then then we played Dovish. Psych 9173, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you, but when you may say those comments, I appreciate it because it makes the effort worthwhile. Detroit is the team to beat. No, they are not. The team to beat is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Because despite the fact that they're missing Braden Point now and Anthony Cirelli is out, they've got Vasilevsky playing the type of goaltending that he played before. And they've still got a lot of talent on their team, and they're very well coached with John Cooper. Detroit, while they have a lot of talent and they're up and coming, if there's one thing I know for certain, Todd McLellan has a special way of losing his bench mid-season. And McLellan's done that with a bunch of teams, whether it's in Edmonton or I forget where else he coached. I think he coached in Anaheim as well. I could be wrong about that. But McLellan is not a popular coach with his players. When he first gets in there, you see what happened in Detroit. He just, you know, he gets the guys going in the right direction. But then when he wants more, he loses them. And so I'm just waiting for McLellan to screw this up. I really am. He's not as good as people think with young players. And his time in Edmonton proved that. So just wait. To me, the team to beat in the East beyond Tampa is going to be Buffalo. You have to admit, Buffalo's got all the right tools to move ahead. Their defense is young and mobile. Their goaltending has been very good. Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Josh Doan up front. They've been extremely good. They've got good coaching in Lindy Ruff, and they haven't lost very many games in the last month and a half. So how can you count the Buffalo out? Honestly, they may be in the wild card spot now, but they're right up the Canadiens' tail. So I'm not writing them off by any stretch, and they may very well be the team to beat. That's my perspective on it. Montreal MUFC. Montreal have out-patterned the Panthers in those battles in the trenches yesterday. I think we might need a chunk of extra grit and sandpaper before the playoffs to help us beat Detroit regardless. That's not a bad point to make in regards to the sandpaper. And that's kind of where the importance of a guy like Brendan Gallagher, number one, comes in. Arbor Jacki comes in, even Jaden Struble. Caden Gooley, another guy who delivers sandpaper. And the Canadiens wanted that sandpaper from somebody like a Zach Bolduc. They're getting it from guys like Veleno. They're getting it from Josh Anderson. They always get it from Gallagher. But they need it higher in the lineup because those top two lines, if it gets overly physical, you don't want to see them disappear like we saw them disappear in the first round last season. So, yes, do they need a little bit more grit? Sure. That grit costs things. And that's the problem with it. Everybody wants it. The ideal player in this league right now, grit-wise, would be somebody like a Tom Wilson out of Washington, right? A guy who can score goals but plays on that edge, right? You'd want that player on your team going into the playoffs. You hate playing against him, obviously, right? Could you imagine him and Josh Anderson being on the same team? Wouldn't that be awesome after everything that went on last year against Washington? That'd be really cool. See where that turns out. And yeah, whether it's Detroit or Buffalo we face, we need sandpaper. Listen, if there's one thing we know about Buffalo is that they can't handle a forecheck. Neither can Detroit. So if the Canadiens play the way they did in the last few games, where they press the opposition's defense, they're going to get more scoring chances, like they did in these last 5 games. The Canadiens played almost perfect hockey. Get in on the forecheck, get the puck, create scoring chances. Take care of your own zone. Get good goaltending. They got all that. So if they continue to get all that, they're going to be just fine, even in the playoffs. Tony, we need goaltending to settle, and that's for sure. I would agree. And, while it's encouraging what Sam Montembeault did last game, what's annoyed me is how everybody's ready to anoint him the number 1 goaltender for the Canadiens again. How quickly we forget he absolutely shit the bed the entire season, except for maybe a handful of games this year. So I would rather think that we'd be in a better spot with a 1A, 1B until the playoffs come, and then let the best man play. We don't have to go out and get a goaltender. They're both capable of stopping pucks. But what they're not capable of is being consistent. And so long as they're consistent until the end of the season, I'll be happy with whoever starts in the playoffs, whether it's Montembeault or Dobish. Frankly, though, given his performance this year, I would hope that Dobish gets a little bit higher consideration based on the fact that he's done well against some very difficult matchups. The Canadiens did the same thing to Carey Price back in the day, if you remember, when they gave all the tough matchups to him and they allowed Jaro Halak to start in the playoffs in 2010, right? And everybody was complaining how bad Carey Price was, but really you didn't realize that he was facing all the tough teams back then. And then Halak was getting a little bit easier matchups. That's not to take anything away from what Halak did in the playoffs. But in the regular season, every tough contest the Canadiens played, Carey Price was in goal, and it was unfair to him. We have one of the best 2 lines in the league. I think we have the best top 6 in the league, frankly, as it stands. Right now, both the top line and the second line of Kapanen, Slafkovsky, and Demidov are producing. Not to mention that in the last few games, we've gotten contributions from the secondary scoring as well, whether it's Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, who scored in back-to-back games. Both those guys with 3-point games recently. Are you kidding? When was the last time you'd expect that from those guys? Well, we're getting exactly what these guys were expected to do all season long because they're getting healthy, and that's what we want. We need to establish Montembeault as a backup goalie and settle the doubt. It's not a question of establishing anything as a backup goaltender. To me, it's really important that a goalie earns the right to play. God knows I've coached teams where I've had 2 very strong goalies. In fact, I coached a Bantam Double B team, I think it was maybe 15 years ago, where I had 2 extremely strong goaltenders. And I had a decision to make. Who played better? Whose style did I prefer? Who got better results? And I ended up picking one of the 2, and I got a parent up my ass so far I had to clean my teeth with Scotch tape. And so I can tell you that it's not an easy decision to make who your starter is going to be. I made it anyway. I told the parents, I said, this is playoff hockey. And I got that team to the regionals. Guarantee you I didn't do anything wrong. Right? We won a silver medal that year in the region. I'm not going to complain about it. Neither should the parents. The kids did extremely well. We got the goaltending we wanted. But you need to start whoever's going to do best. I actually started Mark in the playoffs against a team I knew he always had good success against. And that's where you need to pick your spots. You need to do your homework. Who does he play better versus? Who does he play worse against? Measure those. And then you decide who you put in nets. If he's on a hot streak, keep him there. Let him win. When you look at what the Canadiens did in these last 5 games, as an example, 3 wins for Dobish. The 4th one was a loss in overtime, and they decided it was time to put Monty in. And based on the result, it was the right decision. Is Monty going to start after the break? It could be very possible given his results. Or are they going to start Dobish given his results? They're in a tough situation right now. But you don't need to establish a backup. The backup's going to present himself based on his results. So nothing to go there. Psych 9173, hey coach, I just wanted to ask which Habs player has impressed you the most this season and why? Wow, that is an absolutely fantastic question. The player that's impressed me the most and why? I've got a couple of them actually, and they're both on the same line. One of them is Oliver Kapanen. Why? Because last year, he didn't really show very much, right, in the games that he played with the Canadiens. I understand he was on the wing, he didn't play center, he was off position, he wasn't comfortable. I get it. But given what he's been able to do this year, he leads all rookies with 18 goals. He's a key component on the second line with Slavkovsky and Demidov. I'm beyond my expectations, that's for sure. I had never expected Kapanen to have that many goals at this point of the season. Close to 20? No. I would have I think he would have been near a dozen in my head for the entire season. He may very well get 25 based on the way he's playing, but we'll see. But I like what Kapanen has brought to the table. And the other guy who's really impressed me this year is Juraj Slavkovsky. And now I know that he's developed over time, right? And he's slowly but surely become a much more rounded NHL player. But what impressed me the most wasn't the fact that he was getting better even with the first line. What impressed me is that they took him from the first line, put him on the second, and he became the line driver on that line from the wing. Normally your line driver is the guy who's up the middle. But obviously you're not going to give that job to Kapanen, despite the fact that he's played extremely well. And you're definitely not going to give that job to Demidov, despite the fact that he's got the skill to actually do it. So they put Slavkovsky there to give that line some stability. And he's delivered it in droves. He's been physical. He's led plays up the ice. And their chemistry is undeniable. While he's got chemistry with Suzuki and Caulfield, and that's been established for a long time, what we've seen from that second line in terms of chemistry, their ability to pass in tight quarters and create scoring opportunities, it's not something we've seen in a long time. And the fact that he's been able to adapt that way, given what everybody expected him to be after he was drafted, is really a positive. So he's been the most impressive player to me this year for the Montreal Canadiens. And he's only going to get better, right? There's no doubt in my mind that he still hasn't reached his ceiling yet. So thanks for that question, Psych. It was really, really good. Ryan, I'd like to know, sorry about that, I'd like to know what you meant by contrable. Because I haven't been impressed with Zach Bolduc as a player, right? He came in here from St. Louis playing a little bit more of a gritty game. And while he started off well, right, scoring, I think it was 5 or 6 goals early in the season, he's kind of disappeared since then. Missing the net, being too fine with his shots, not being physical along the boards. And Danault's been brought into Montreal for one very specific reason, because he's good at faceoffs, and the Canadiens needed help at the dot. So being able to have that strength up the middle, there's no argument to be had there. That's why Danault's here. Matt, Lane Hudson can play either side. He could be a forward. He is so good. I'm not disagreeing with you, Matt. Listen, I'm not saying that he can't play both sides. What I'm saying is his strength is on the left. Okay? And every player has that strength based on the side they shoot from. So if he plays on his strong side, and here's the thing about playing on your strong side, it's only in the defensive zone. In the offensive zone, Do whatever you want, but always make sure you get back in the defensive posture on your strong side when you're playing that side. Defensively, he's nowhere near as strong on his backhand or on the right side. Okay, so I'm not going to agree with that part of it. Offensively, absolutely, no question. Defensively, you want to give him an opportunity, especially given the fact that he's a smaller player. Why would you give him another disadvantage by putting him on his backhand? Honestly, I prefer him on the left all day, every day in his own zone. Offensively, like I said, do what you want. Go to the right side. I don't care. Just make sure you switch. Demigod 93, Caulfield, Susie, Doc. Yeah, they've been good, and they're only going to get better as Doc gets more comfortable, that's for sure. Ryan, the Habs need defense because you hound the offensive zone, they can't get the puck, so not shoot for them, so def with off. Ryan, I don't know what you're trying to say here, but I can tell you this much. The problem with the defense isn't their inability to get the puck out of the zone on a regular basis. The problem with the defense has been, especially in the second period, right? Because they get overly fatigued. They can't get the puck out. They can't get a line change in, right? And in the last 5 games, as I mentioned before, the Canadiens have actually gotten better in the second period. Their last 2 games, they dominated both in the second. So if they continue to do that moving forward, there's no need to go out and get defense because they won't be nearly as fatigued as you would expect. Okay, that's where you were going at, Demigod. Okay. Slav, Kapanen, and Demidov. Okay, so you want to outline the 4 lines. I get it. So we had Caulfield, Suzuki, Doc, Slav, Kapanen, and Demidov, Newhook, Danault, Texier, Galley, Evans, and Anderson. Here's my problem with this. Texier is not a third-line player, right? And he would have to play the left side, not the right. Newhook played extremely well with Slav, right? And so that's fine. And we know that Slavkovsky can play on the first line. And you can move them back and forth. I'm not for Slav remaining on the second line after Newhook comes back. Newhook did nothing to lose his spot on the second line. If you want to put Newhook on the third just to be able to find his legs again, initially, I have no problem with that. But eventually, he needs to get back to that second line because that second line was lethal when he was there. Detroit is the only team that shut out the Avs this season. That is absolutely true. But that is 1 game, and that's it. The Canadiens played pretty well versus the Avs in their recent contest too, didn't they? It depends on how the team is, right? So it goes without saying that Detroit is a good team, but it's just 1 game. Yeah, Matt. Tom Wilson with Suzuki and Cole Caulfield would be a hell of a line. That goes without saying. That's why I mentioned Wilson. He's the ideal physical guy who can contribute. All those years playing alongside Alex Ovechkin, they count for something. And so Wilson with Suzuki and Cole would be a fantastic line. And I like the way you're thinking, right? That's the type of player we need. People are looking for the pretty guys, the Jordan Kyrous, the Robert Thomases, the Ryan O'Reillys. But they don't come without a price, and neither would Wilson, right? But, it's dare to dream, right? Who do you think Suzuki's going to play with in the Olympics? Who would you like to see him play with? Well, honestly, Suzuki would be a winger that I would put on a line with Sidney Crosby. Doesn't matter who's playing the other side, right? Now that Braden Point is out and Cirelli is out, you may very well see Suzuki play in the middle. But originally, I think John Cooper wanted to play him on the wing on a third line. And if you're playing him on the wing with on a third line, that means you're playing him with, possibly Sidney Crosby or somebody else. I want to see Suzuki and Crosby together. Those 2 guys up front would be crazy lethal, right, for Team Canada. And here's the fun part about that, to feed into all the guys that want Sidney Crosby to come to Montreal. Let's say we're in the Olympics and Suzuki plays with Crosby and they put up points like there's no tomorrow. doesn't that kind of entice Crosby to say, maybe I do want to go to Montreal and play with Nick, right? Just food for thought for all of you guys out there. Now, Montreal MUFC. Seeing the two lines performing as they do allows me to forget that our best 1-2 line combo we had in the last 20 years is Kovalev, Koivu, Higgins, Kostitsyn, Plekanec, Kostitsyn. Oh my God, you had to bring that up. You're not wrong either. Yeah, it's been a while since we've had a 1-2 combination that's been good. But yeah, oh my God. The Kostitsyn's playing on the same line. Holy hell. Never a good thing, let me tell you. You knew I was going to say Kapanen, huh? Well, yeah. He didn't expect it, right? Joe. Cup or bust every year. Dude, are you kidding? Cup or bust every year. 4 years ago, would you have said cup or bust when Marty St. Louis first took over and we had no talent? It's one of those things, man. I get that this city is cup hungry. Toronto's been cup hungry since '67. And how did they build their team? They went out and they drafted guys who had all kinds of talent, but their character was non-existent, right? And so, Toronto ended up getting rid of the wrong guy as far as I'm concerned, right? They got rid of Marner. When you take a look and, Nylander's not that bright. You take a look at Austin Matthews, the way he handled that Marner first matchup with Toronto in Toronto, and the way he treated Mark Masters, you don't deserve to wear a C on your jersey when you say shit like that. I mean, it's not cup or bust every year. It's get to the point where you're cup or bust every year. We're not there yet, and we're not going to be there for a couple of years. I'm still going to be patient. I love where this has gone. I love where it's going, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to love where it ends too, with a parade on St. Catherine Street. What do I think is the cause of Demidov breaking sticks? Is that normal within the league? That coming from Dank2426. Okay. I did a show about this a few weeks back, but I'm going to get to it again. When you take a look at, I wish I had a stick in the studio to show you. When you take a look at hockey sticks, right? The area under your hands from there to the heel of the stick is the thinnest part, right? That's what allows for the flex to happen, right? It flexes from your hand all the way down through the blade, and that's where you generate power through your shot. Retail sticks are nowhere near as thin in that area, which is called the taper, as professional sticks. And everybody's saying, oh, how the hell do you let $400 sticks break? Every manufacturer, right, who has a deal with NHL players, in this case, it's Demidov and Warrior, they spend upwards of $16 million a year on hockey sticks for players at the NHL level. It doesn't matter who the manufacturer is, whether it's Bauer, True, CCM, or Warrior. And I digress. If I forget anybody, I apologize up front. But when you take a look at those sticks, they're made specifically for performance. And they don't last more than a game or two. And you have to be objective with a stick. Back in the day when the sticks were made of wood and they didn't break as easy, right? You could use a stick for a month and nobody would care, right? And if you use the stick and you scored often, you never wanted to take that stick out of your hands, right? So that's not the case anymore because sticks take a beating. And just like anything else, right, that's made of carbon or plastic, the more it flexes, the weaker it gets. So it has a shelf life. So if you know that a stick that you buy in a retail store can last you, let's say, a month. I'm just talking by example. If you're playing in a competitive junior league, let's say, right? It's going to last you a month, let's say, tops. It could break earlier than that, but it won't break based on wear and tear. An NHL stick won't last you more than 3 games. Why? The flex on the stick, the thinness of the taper, and the battles that you go through on the ice at the NHL level. And players, they don't keep track of that, right? The timing. Oh, I played, Philly last night, and I was getting hacked all night long by whoever. My stick took a beating. maybe I should change my stick. They don't think about it. They just grab the stick off the rack and go. So it's not something they keep track of. They should, but they don't. So I appreciate the question. It's a great one. Good evening, Coach. If we are reflecting on the season so far and an outlook, I'm happy with the progress so far this year. But realistically, if the Habs can win a series in the playoffs, I'll be really happy. And as would I. As I mentioned, it's about progress, right? Last year, the deal was get to the playoffs. They did it. They backdoored it, but they got in. And what I mean by backdooring it is they lost a bunch of games at the end of the season when they could have clinched a week or two earlier. So, this year, get in concisively, don't leave any doubt, and win a series. Yes, I agree. That would be progress in the right direction. That would also give the Canadiens a better idea of, hey, we got through the first series with these players, but the second series, which got a little bit tighter and a little bit more physical, we couldn't get through. Why didn't we get through it? It allows them to, again, evaluate the team for what it is and move forward and make more decisions based on that evaluation. So yeah, I absolutely want them to win a series. That's a great question, Apache. Do I think Doc can develop the same chemistry with Suzuki and Caulfield? The same chemistry as what? Psych. I'd like you to clear that up. I think he already does. I mean, he's played with them before, right? It's not the first time that he's played with Suzuki and Caulfield. So there's a certain level of chemistry already there. Of course, that was taken away, whether it was injury or Doc moving down the lineup, whatever the case was. I can't remember offhand, but they've played together before, and I've always liked them as a threesome. So, or I should say trio, not threesome. Oh my God, help me. But yeah. I don't have a problem with it, and I think they can develop good chemistry. That is almost certain. Apache, you're intrigued about the prospects joining the team in the near future. I'm actually going to do a show about the prospects a little bit later during this Olympic break. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff up the pipeline, right? And we know that through the draft, the Canadiens are going to be able to add a few more layers to that pipeline. So I'm interested to see what direction they're going to go in, and that's another show I'm actually going to do during the Olympics. So be prepared for that. Here are the lines you'd offer. Demidov, Suzuki, Caulfield, Slav, Newhook, Danault, Anderson, Doc Galley, Bolduc, Kapanen, Joshua Roy. Ryan, where are you going with that? No. Joshua Roy is not an NHL player. He's not going to be an NHL player. They're not going to put Danault on the wing. He's a centerman. Newhook's going to play on the wing, and they won't put Danault with Slavkovsky and Newhook. That takes away way too much offense. So yeah, I don't like these lines whatsoever. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly don't. Yeah, I don't want him to talk Sydney into it, psych. I want him to play Sydney into it. Ace Andres, you like the idea of putting Slap back on the first line? He's the big man we need. He is. And getting Newhook back actually gives us the luxury of getting that line reunited again on a regular basis. So I have no issue with that whatsoever. If you want to bring it back up, what a hell of a goal Lane Hudson scored the other night. I'm not sure I've witnessed a Habs defenseman who is that skilled. You know what? Hands-wise, no. We've had skilled defensemen before. When you take a look at PK, who else comes to mind when it comes to defensemen who are skilled? There's not very many that can stick handle the way Lane Hudson does from the defensive side of things. That goes without saying. Not even PK could do that. But what's even more impressive that somebody did point out in the comments of my last show, which was based on that. You know what? I'm going to bring that up in a second. The best part about this play and that goal was the fact that it started 200 feet back when he made a play in his own zone to get the puck over to the right side and then came up the ice along with Anderson to get that pass. That was the impressive part. 36 kilometers an hour to get up the ice, get open, get that pass, and not only that, but tuck it in where mommy keeps the cookies top corner. That's absolutely crazy. Now, getting back to my show from yesterday, where I talked about the Olympics and you know, NHL pros versus amateurs. And if you haven't watched that episode, I encourage you to go back and look at it, because I talk a lot of history about the Canadian hockey program. And I know that a lot of younger fans prefer the pros being there, but guys that are my age can appreciate what the amateurs brought to the table, especially, you know, when you talk about, as I mentioned, the Miracle on Ice, Team USA winning, how many times Canada came close with non-professional teams, especially in where was it? It was in Sarajevo in 1992. Not Sarajevo, Lillehammer in 1994. Actually, there were a lot of good players on those teams. So, you know, to see that go away and that development curve go away as a coach and as a former player, it was a loss for me when it came to hockey. I loved the Canada Cup or the World Cup of Hockey the way it was when it was 6 teams, not the garbage where they threw in Team Europe and Team North America and whatever, right? When you had the Soviet Union and Finland and Sweden and Canada and at the time Czechoslovakia. It was great hockey. It was compelling hockey. And it was stuff that we loved to watch, right? And all that came from the Summit Series in 72. So we all loved that. That's what we grew up with. The Summit Series, they stopped school, for Christ's sake, in Game 8 for everybody to watch. Now, of course, I was born in 72, so I didn't get to watch the game. I watched it later. I watched the whole series later. But listening to my brothers talk about it, my brothers are much older than I am, you got an appreciation for how important that series was to Canadians back then, right? And that was pros, best on best. NHL pros versus the amateur pros from the Soviet Union. Nobody could play hockey like the Soviets, right? And so go back and watch the show and listen to my comments there and tell me what you think if you haven't watched it already. But for me, it was great hockey, and the storyline where the underdog could win was really what drew you in to the Olympics and other tournaments, right? So I kind of missed that a little bit. Yikes, I wish we never strayed away from wooden sticks. Brett Hull's a legend for scoring a total of 844 goals with a wooden stick and can teach a lot. There's no doubt. You take a look at, you know who else? Al McInnes. Never used a composite stick. He'd probably kill somebody with his shot, right? And his shot was over 100 miles an hour with a wooden stick. So think about that one for a minute. Blocking shots. Who on the Habs is superior at the skill and yet doesn't get severely injured? There is nobody on the Montreal Canadiens better at blocking shots right now than Noah Dobson. But here's my beef with the way they block shots. And this goes back to the 80s, where there was a certain center for the Montreal Canadiens by the name of Guy Carbonneau that would block shots by going flat on the ice and using his shin guards. It's a lost art. And why is that important? Well, you've seen the reactions of guys like Jakub Dobish and Sam Montembeault when guys have screened them and they haven't seen shots come in. Well, the way Carbonneau used to block shots, and I asked Patrick Waugh about this specifically, okay, when I met him once. And he outright told me that the best part about the way Carbo blocked shots is that he knew that the puck would never get underneath him and he would block it. So he could stay up and wait for the shot to clear Carbo if he didn't block it, as opposed to it getting through him, because it never did. Carbo used to go lie down on his side and he'd cross his legs to close up the hole between his legs. That's smart, a player. And his timing was always perfect. It would go off his shin guards up into the crowd and people would clap. I employed that same way of blocking shots when I played as a forward, and my coach loved it. And it's a lost art form. The way guys block shots now, yeah, they should be severely injured. You've got guys that turn their back, turn their side, turn their ass to a shot. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you nuts? I was always taught, block a shot, face it. Don't turn your back to it. You're less protected on your backside. And I'm not talking about your upper posterior either. I'm talking about the back of your legs and everything. There's nowhere near as much plastic there to protect you. So why would you want to do that? So go back and take a look at how Guy Carbonneau used to block shots. It was really effective. And defensemen, they didn't focus on blocking shots. Defensemen focused on getting people out from in front of the net to give the goalie a chance to see the puck and stop it. To me, that's the right way to defend, not getting in front of your goalie and fronting. I hate fronting defenses. Ryan, I know we don't need to trade Demidov, that's for sure, and he's not going anywhere. I can tell you that up front. Hey, Steve, how's it going? Yeah, PK was not as skilled as Hudson. I get that, but he was the most skilled defenseman prior to Hudson. Your gold medals in 2000 and 2010 probably gives away your age. Not necessarily, because I saw those too. Stephen Kitchener, yes, Olympics should be left to amateurs again. Soviets are no more. And it's not just because of that. While that best on best was created because of the Soviets, now, I mean, the equivalent to what the Olympics were is the World Juniors every year, right? For kids that are under the age of 20. But imagine taking players that are fringe players, right? Guys in the American Hockey League, guys in Europe that are Canadian, and allowing them the chance to play for their country at the Olympics. Just think about that for a minute, right? Speaking of international hockey rivalries, which opponent would be the one you'd hate more since you saw them both? U.S. or Soviets? I don't know if hate's a really tough word to use in this circumstance, right? I'm not going to say I hated them, disliked facing them. It had to be the Soviets. The U.S. at that time was never really as skilled. I would love to see, best on best amateurs right now between the U.S. and Canada. You've heard me on this show talk about how I hate the way Canadian hockey development has gone in recent years. I think putting the U.S. versus Canada in a series where you've got the best amateurs on the ice would really deliver a picture for Canadian hockey that they could use moving forward about how they're developing their players. Because I can tell you this, based on the structure in USA Hockey and Hockey Canada, I don't foresee Canada winning that series. Just think about that. But who I hated to play the most against, not that I hated the teams, it had to be the Soviets. And not because they were communists. It had nothing to do with politics. To me, it was about the beauty of the game they played, right? The fluidity of their passing, the fact that they were willing to cycle the puck between all five players on the ice. Defensemen were encouraged to move up front, much like they are now in the NHL. They played in a cluster where all five players came up together, all five players came back together. It didn't allow for long stretch passes. Obviously, back then, there was a red line in, so you couldn't have stretch passes. So it allowed them to play in clusters like that, right? Where, they can move the puck up, the defenseman could get beyond the blue line, and then move it up to their forwards and be able to get into the zone and just move freely, right? Amongst themselves. All five of them. Think about the Olympic rings for a minute, okay? Just to get into it, okay? If you take a look at the Olympic rings, you see how they interlock? That's a microcosm of how Soviet hockey was back then, in how they moved around the ice freely, they moved pucks to each other, and it confused the hell out of defenses. That was the beauty of their game. So I hated playing them just as much as anybody else. But there was also Czechoslovakia, another team from a communist country who played very similarly to the way the Russians did, right? The Swedes and the Finns, nowhere near as physical as Team Canada would be, or any other, Team USA. And they didn't really have as much skill back then as the Soviets and Czechoslovakia did. But by and large, the team I hated to face the most had to be the Soviets, bar none. Great question, Montreal MUFC. Steve, you were 5. Yeah, you remember watching it in school. Yep. Roy, I want to know how much do you hate me by telling me the temperature in Bangkok right now? How much do you hate me? It's so cold here, and you have to tell me it's 30 degrees in Bangkok. I thought you liked me, man. I love you, Roy. I played hockey for 14 years and absolutely loved wooden sticks. You know what? I had a deal with Sherwood back in the day. I was one of their stick testers when I played midget and junior. And when they would create a new design for sticks, they would give me a dozen just to test them out because I had a propensity of snapping them because I would get a lot of flex on them, right? So and on the shaft where they're not supposed to break. So if they did break, I put the stick together, taped it up, sent them back to Sherbrooke so they could take a look at it at the factory. It was fun back then. I really enjoyed that. And the sticks were free. Enjoyed that even more. Aces Andres, I remember watching the USSR skating so smooth like you described, but they were men skating against boys. I don't even think it was men skating against boys back then. It was just the Soviets being fluid. You're talking about teams in Russia that skated 12 months a year, right? That's all they did. It's a lot like the way the Chinese develop their sports now, right? At a very young age, they create prodigies in China. You're going to be a chess prodigy. You're a computer prodigy, etc. The same applies for sports. They're trying to get there as far as their hockey programs are concerned. They're not quite there yet, but they identify players that are, very smart, recognize how the game works, etc. The thing about the Russians, right, is just they were ahead of their time in the sense that they had figure skating coaches teaching their hockey players how to skate. Their edge work and control was so refined vis-a-vis the way Canadian players were being taught that when Canadian players finally caught up to it, right, you're talking it was 20 years later. But that was the beauty of the Russians. All of them skated like Paul Coffey, for lack of a better way of putting it. And we all know how smooth Paul Coffey was in his day, right? Geek Carbonell was insane and yet artistic when he blocked shots. Yes, I agree. Well, that's why I tried to emulate him on the ice. It was just the way he did it. And now, granted, all the wear and tear took a toll on his body as he got older. But man, oh man, artist is a great way of putting it. Since we, Mr. Reactin Rules. Nice. I love that handle. Since we know Fowler and Monty will be our two goalers for years to come, when can we get trading Dobish, Line, Reinbacher, etc.? Are we looking for a right winger, first line, second line center, or sixth defender? Let me stop you. If you think Montembeault and Fowler are our goalies of the future, you are sorely mistaken. If things work out the way I think they're going to go, Montembeault's not going to be here much longer. Okay? When you take a look at goaltending in Montreal and the way Montembeault's played, right now your top two goalies in this organization are Dobish and Fowler. Montembeault's not there. And he's got a contract coming up at the end of next year. So the question is going to be, are the Canadiens going to hold on to him or are they going to let him go given the fact that his contract is coming up? That's the more interesting question. And honestly, Fowler and Dobish together would make a hell of a 1-2 punch. Now, when it comes to trading players, we talked about it before. Line is not going anywhere. Reinbacher is definitely not going anywhere because the Canadiens need right shot defensemen. And I don't think they're looking for a winger. They may be in the market for a second line center, but given the work that Kapanen's done this year, there's no urgency for that. So, and with Hage coming up, we can hold pat and I'll be extremely happy. Somebody becomes available that is too good to pass up, that's another story altogether. But given the way the market is right now, that's not happening either. The New Year's game up on your YouTube channel under the live tab. Which New Year's game are you talking about? The Winter Classic? You call that a Winter Classic? It was in a stadium with a closed roof. New York Yankees, Lakers, Patriots never say 2 years away. Habs should be the standard in the NHL, so win every year. What do we play for? The bloody cup. Joe, look, when you take a look at Yankees, Lakers, Patriots, the Patriots, since Tom Brady left until this year, were not saying we're not 2 years away. They knew they were. When you talk about the Lakers, They've got LeBron. They've always had superstars on their team. The Canadiens did not. And the New York Yankees, they pay for the privilege. Every year they end up paying their luxury tax. So there's no comparison. And yes, 2 years away, when you're rebuilding, it takes almost 6 years. We're 4 years in. We're 2 years away. And I have no qualms in saying that, and I don't think anybody disagrees at this point, because there's still pieces coming. Okay, Ryan, the GM is dumb. Why is Montembeault not in the AHL? The reason why Montembeault's not in the AHL is because you don't want to lose him for nothing. He's not waiver exempt. He has to clear waivers to go down, like Sammy Blais did. Right? Earlier this season, we lost Sammy Blais on waivers to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Okay? They don't want to lose Montembeault for nothing, which is why he's in the NHL. Fowler, he's in his rookie season. He got a cup of coffee with the Canadiens, looked good, but before he went back, he started to regress a little bit. So he needed to go back to the AHL to get his game back and stabilize his thought process. That's all fine. Marciano moves up to the NHL. Fowler moves up next year. We're in a great spot. What happens to Monty? Montembeault's in the last year of his contract, right? You don't move him down at the end of next year. You look to move him now, right? And the other part of that is Dobish can't go down either because he isn't waiver exempt either. So it's a lot like what we saw with Primo, where he was in waiver exempt and he had to stay with the Canadiens, and we had to carry 3 goaltenders a few years ago. Same kind of idea, except Fowler is on his ELC and he's waiver eligible for the next 2 years. No, the Spengler Cup is not the same thing because Team Canada and the Spengler Cup, Steve, isn't an all-Canadian team. Okay, they do have guys that come from other countries that play there. Yes, the Russians were incredible to watch, Psych, I get that. I'm a Canadian and like the cold. Just dress for it and enjoy pond hockey games. Lest you forget the nasty humidity in the summer months. Dan in London, Ontario. Dan, I'm not arguing the point. I'm just saying I don't like it when somebody tells me in the middle of winter that it's 30 degrees in Bangkok, because it doesn't get colder than that in Bangkok either. I mean, come on. It's like putting salt in the wound. Right now, we've got a polar vortex going on, and it's absolutely frigid outside. And yes, I do dress for it, okay? I don't mind it. But don't tell me it's 30 degrees in Bangkok. I don't want to know. And I know Roy is just rubbing it in because he's an expat, right? So he loves to do that to me. There's a good documentary about Russian hockey called The Russian Five. Yes, I've watched it. A must-see for all of you. If you never got to watch the Soviets play, my God, it's a must. You want to know why hockey is the way it is now? Never mind the Molson Open Summit in 1999. Go back and take a look at this, and I will tell you that it's a must-watch because the Soviet influence on hockey can still be seen today, and it's really important. You're not wrong in this one. The Chinese are very much better at individual sports than team sports. And the Soviets were good at everything. The Soviets also cheated a lot. I don't know why I'm whispering, but anyway. Fowler Dobish, yes, absolutely. I agree blocking shots sucks. Play the man or the puck. Let the goalie do his job. Yeah, but oftentimes, like I said, right, if you block your shots like Carbonneau did and you stay down on the ice, you actually give your goalie an advantage. In front of the net, move them out. I honestly think none of those 3 will be there in the future. They need to be on the lookout for someone better. Which 3 are you talking about, Steve? The goalies? Because Fowler is really good. He's been up here for a bit, but his pedigree is fantastic, man. You may very well be talking about the second coming of Carey Price and his patience and his ability to play and his mental strength. And that's what you want from a goaltender, right? So I'm not writing him off anytime soon. I wish I knew about Carbo's shot blocking method. Shot blocking hurts AF otherwise. Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah. There's another must-see. You want to watch a hockey game, Habs versus Red Army, December 31st, 1975. An absolute classic game. If you haven't watched it, you got to do it. Yeah, Steve, you just said it as well. But yeah, it is the best game I've ever seen as well. Back and forth all game long. And oddly enough, the goalies in that game were Tretiak and Dryden. Tretiak was better than Dryden in this game, honestly. Aces Andres, I'm biased, and I think we play better when we're physical. But who do you think should stay, Arbor or Struble? Okay. Honestly, the way it is right now is when I look at players, I always look at development curve, right? And right now, as it stands, I'm not liking where Struble is. He's plateaued for me. Whereas Arbor is learning to play a more contained style of defense where he's not chasing players and he's getting better at it. Does he have the same physicality as Struble? I think he can be more physical than Struble. Does he skate as well? No, but he's worked on it. And that's what I want to see from him in the offseason next year. But again, that all depends on whether or not the Canadiens are going to re-sign him as an RFA or let him go to free agency. It's a question that we have to ask, right? Which one of the two? Given the fact that the Canadiens don't have a deterrent when it comes to this, my preference is to keep Struble. You can't not have somebody that can chuck the knuckles, right? So you need to have him there. People are asking me about Florian. Well, Florian's a good player. Still needs to develop, though. And the fact that he can chuck the knuckles, that bodes well for him as well. But I want that guy who comes up to fight as a forward to be just as effective as a Tom Wilson could be. So he still needs a little bit of time, but he may be pushing harder than he did this year in next season's camp. So we'll see how that goes. But between the two defensemen, personally, I'd prefer keeping Arbor. Dobish is 56th save percentage with an awful attitude, while Montembeault knows he's a number 2 with a good attitude. Okay. What are you basing the fact that he's got a bad attitude on? Right? I'm going to give you an example of what a player should be. Earlier this year, while it didn't look good at the time, we saw Jakub Dobish get emotional after a game because he knew he didn't play well. Right? And he took the blame himself. Whereas in the Boston game, it was said that Montembeault pointed fingers at others instead of looking inwards at himself after allowing those 2 goals in 12 seconds. Granted, the second one, yes, absolutely. It went off of Carrier, who missed blocking a shot. So I have no problem with him I don't have a problem with him assuming the blame is on the defenseman because he did deflect a shot. What I don't like is the fact that he threw his defenseman under the bus in public. Okay? Goaltenders are the last line of defense. The backhand from Minton got through him way too easy. And he didn't take responsibility for it. And that's what bothers me. Okay? The thing that bothers me further than that is that Montembeault was anointed the number 1 goalie in Montreal out of necessity, not because he earned anything. He's got a career 8 something, I think it's 892 now, save percentage. I'd have to look it up. It was at 898 to start the season. It's got to be worse now. And he's never been a consistent goaltender. You get good games, you get bad games, and he gets fatigued way too easy. Last year, you watched him, right, playing 62 games. Before the Four Nations face-off, he started getting fatigued and losing games. After the Four Nations, he had his energy back, and he played well. And then before the playoffs, the fatigue started to set in again. I'm not a believer in Sam Montembeault, given his track record, right? I'm impressed with what he's been able to accomplish, given his limited skill set. Abso-freaking-lutely. All right? He was a third stringer in Florida before the Canadiens grabbed him. The Canadiens grabbed him. Why? Because they're unsure of Carey Price's status. Okay, so he was a fill-in. And he went from being a fill-in to being the number 1 goaltender after Jake Allen was traded. Wow. Now, is he the number 1? No, he's back to where he belongs as a backup, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think Dobish has an attitude. I think Dobish has a chip on his shoulder because he's got something to prove. And I want that goaltender between the pipes for my team. Because if he's got something to prove, he's hungry. And when he's hungry, he plays better. I mentioned Price and Halak before, right? Halak always thought he was better than Price. Long term, did that pan out as right? No. But at the time, he thought he was better than Price, and he played like it. So I want to see Dobesh with that same attitude. I don't have a problem with attitude whatsoever in my goaltenders. Do I think MSL is making a mistake by not trusting Arbor? I'm not convinced it's Marty that doesn't trust him. I'm convinced it's Robida. I don't think it's a Marty St. Louis decision as far as how much time in games that he uses him, right? It's situational. When the Canadiens are, in tight games, okay, that's when you see Arbor's time come down. When the Canadiens were ahead the other day, he got more ice time. When they're behind, Robida doesn't trust him to be able to defend. Although he hasn't made, other than the one game where he made 2 very bad mistakes, he hasn't made anything egregious other than that. So, like I said, you're not going to sign a player or go out and acquire a player based on what he did in the past. You also can't punish him for things that he did in the past, especially when he's young and still developing. And given the fact that defensemen develop longer, or it takes longer to develop defensemen, I should say, than forwards, right? This is what, his 3rd season in the National Hockey League? How can you be punishing him for still developing his game? He's still got a ways to go, right? Arby's bacon and cheddar with horsey sauce and curly fries all day. Now I'm getting hungry. Thanks for that. Coach, do the Canadiens lack a big point shot? I don't know if I'd say they lack it, but I miss it. But you get it from the wing now, right? As opposed to the point. Back in the day, when you look back, right? And I'm not talking back in the 70s, but I'm talking late 80s, 90s, 2000s. You had the Submans, you had the Surreys, you had the Vladimir Malahovs, who had the big booming shot from the blue line. Markov had a decent shot from the blue line. It wasn't anything to, it wasn't overpowering, but it was good and it was accurate. That to me is more important than, the boomer. But what I find on the Canadiens, as opposed to the booming shot, is a lack of shots from the blue line. Whether it's Dobson or Hudson or Gouli or whomever, getting shots through from the blue line or even taking shots from the blue line, it's disappeared. And it's a very important part of your offense, especially when you're looking for secondary scoring. Your bottom 6 are never going to be those guys that are going to break a game open, right? By creating fancy plays and tic-tac-toe goals and whatever. They're your grunt workers. They're the guys that go in there and get their nose dirty when you need a goal badly, or when you need to really piss off your opponent and get them off their game. There's no better way to do that than to clap a shot from the blue line that gets through, and somebody like a Gallagher or Anderson drive the net, poking at the goaltender, trying to get by the defense and knocking him on their ass. It's old school hockey. I so miss that. Why? Because it's effective. It's lunch pail hockey. It's the way we grew up. Given how old we are, right? And Roy, you're going to attest to this, right? Because you're older than I am. When we watch the game, we really love the skirmishes, the scrums, the guys that would get in there and really get their noses dirty. The John Fergusons of the world and the Johnny Busiks in Boston. And, yes, we love the skill guys too. But we have a love affair with the guys that would get their noses dirty in front of the net, because those were the glue guys that kept teams together and got opponents off their games. And I miss that because we don't have it anymore. But yeah, I'd love to see the big shot from the blue line, but we get it from the wing now, whether it's one-timers from Demidov, Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, you name it. They're coming off the flanks instead. Back when we had the big shot from the blue line, the power play was an overload where you did have 2 defensemen and they were able to pass to each other in short spurts to be able to create those one-timers. The one-timers aren't at the blue line anymore. They're going to the wing instead. So I miss it a little bit, but not that much. Good hockey game in Laval right now. Rocket just tied it against the Cleveland Monsters through an Owen Beck goal. Cleveland's a really good hockey team. And last year they eliminated the Rocket in the playoffs. That's a hell of a rivalry. I love watching those games. But instead, I'm here doing a live show with you. Yeah, I agree, Steve. I haven't seen anything that he's got a bad attitude either. It's okay for him to have an attitude because he believes in himself, but I don't think he's got a bad attitude. The players love playing in front of him. Uh, yeah, straight. He wanted to make history, straight wins, and he lost. That's why he was crying. That's what he said. And you know what? I believe him. And you know, that's fine. To be that passionate about wanting to do something, that's freaking awesome. And yeah, he does hate losing. And you love that in a player. Absolutely. Mr. Reacting Rules. Keeping Dobish Fowler will only give Halak 2.0 because Dobish has exactly the same attitude Halak had. Don't you remember Dobish saying that he's the best of the three because of his win rate ratio? You know what the thing about that is? Once Fowler actually gets up to the National Hockey League and is well established, that ratio is going to change. So it's fine to have the attitude now. And yes, he in the organization, right now, he is the best of the three. But that'll change once Fowler gets more reps at the NHL level. I'm certain of that. How long before Roby does show in the door? Well, let's see. Because right now, the goalies played well in the last few games and the defenses look good. So I don't know. But I want to see Roby give Arbor a much better chance, right? Because up until this point, that chance just hasn't been there. Based on what we've talked about tonight, do you think we're going to make a move for an RD or are they going to try for a top six forward? Again, I don't think they're going to try for either of them. If the deal presents itself, they may think about it, but they're not openly shopping for one from what I'm being told, right? They've said, you know, to the Predators, for example, if Ryan O'Reilly becomes available, give me a call, let me know what you want. They've done that with other teams as well, whether it's St. Louis or Calgary. They've said, you know, there's certain guys that they would have interest in, but what's it going to cost? Let me know if you're going to move them. If there's a deal on the table from another team, give me a call. Let me see. Can I match it? Can I make it better? And that's the way the world goes when it comes to GMing, right? You get a deal from one team, you call another team and say, listen, I've got this on the table. I know you're interested. Can you match it or do better? And you do business that way. It may piss off the other GM, but how do you think the Habs feel with the last two Pierre-Luc Dubois negotiations, where they had, in principle, they had deals on the table, and it was pulled out from under their rug? Why? Because he didn't want to come to Montreal in the first place. He just used them as leverage to be able to get a better deal from other teams. I only wish we could allow Arbor to play and grow like Radko Gudas or Ben Sherratt. They probably had a tough time with discipline early in their careers, but they made themselves indispensable. That's a great comparison. Although Gudas isn't exactly the same type of defenseman that Arbor is, because Arbor's a lot more mobile. The Ben Sherratt comparison is really nice because they're very comparable as far as the type of defenseman that they are. Although I think that Arbor's got a much better upside offensively than Ben. Yeah, the Canadiens, though, they weren't the ones that developed him, right? So, you know, Sherratt came over, I believe it was from Detroit at the time, right? No, he's with Detroit now. Where did he come from? Oh, I can't remember. Hang on. I remember them making the deal, but I can't remember what team it was. Sherratt to... Of course, if I could type, it'd be great. Ben Sherratt doesn't even tell me here. He signed as a free agent with Montreal. He wasn't even dealt here. But where did he come? I can't remember where he came from before. I'm not even going to look at it at this point. But yes, it was the Jets. Thank you. Yeah, Sherratt came over from the Jets and developed in that organization before the Canadiens signed him. So. When the Canadiens signed him, yeah, they gave him a long leash because they signed him. I mean, they went out to get him for a specific reason, right? But yeah, I'd like to see them give him a little bit more upside. Remember when Lafleur used to play the point on the power play? Oh, yeah. And did you miss out on the glory days? Yeah, you did. There was a lot of good hockey being played back then, especially in the 60s and 70s, right? The Canadiens were ever present in the 70s, although the Broad Street Bullies and the Boston Bruins did put a kink in that in the 70s, but you know, they were what they were. They were awesome as far as skill was concerned. Steve, John Kordic, heavyweight champ of all time. I am going to disagree with you, my friend. He may very well be the heavyweight champ on the Canadiens, but the best fighter of all time to me is Bob Probert, bar none. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, but when you're the type of player that Probert was, where you could score goals and fight and win, he was your prototypical good old Canadian boy, although he had his demons. Yeah, Kordic was a sad story. So Montemo mentioning he's not the only one to blame in Boston is a bad attitude, but a rookie with 40 games saying he's better than the other goalies is justified doesn't add up. It's not an attitude, man. It's confidence in your ability to play. He's not pointing fingers at anybody else. He's not saying that Montembeau's playing poorly or Fowler's playing poorly. He's saying he's playing better than them. That is confidence to me. It's not a bad attitude. Pointing the finger at other players on your team? Hell yeah, that's a bad attitude. Yeah, that should add up for you, Mr. Reactive Rules. All right, we are approaching 9:45 as I'm doing this live show. And I think it's about time I wrap it up before my wife asks for a divorce. It's been fun again, guys. I love doing these live shows. I love the conversation. I love everything that everybody contributes, whether it's Ryan, Steve, Roy, don't tell me the temperature next time, Psych, Mr. Reacting Rules, Montreal UFC, my old buddy Steven Kitchener. Aces, Andres. I mean, I can't name you all, but your contribution to the live show is huge. And my dad never lets me forget it. Let's see. Steven Kitchener. Probert only scored goals because of Yzerman. Yes and no. What are my thoughts on trading for Danault? I love the trade. You needed center depth. You needed somebody who could win faceoffs for you. I got no problem with it. Could it have come cheaper? I know it's an expensive cap hit, but you get what you pay for. And Danault has been money on the faceoff dot. Stan Jonathan was a scrapper. You know, Stan, I can't even say his name right. Stan Jonathan wasn't a scrapper. He was a buzzsaw. Okay? Go back and look at when he ended Pierre Bouchard's career. That fight between the two of them where they're chucking the knuckles nonstop. He caves in Pierre Bouchard's face with his fists. Okay? It's bloody. It's ugly. It's not something you wish on anybody, but it's an old school, beat up, screw up fight. Ben, you were late. Catch me next time. Absolutely, buddy. Looking forward to seeing more. Very good show for my first. Thank you, Montreal UFC. Thank you for a great show. Don't thank me, guys, because this show is all about you. It's not about me. I just talk and I give you my opinion and we have banter back and forth. But without you, the live show doesn't work. So thanks. I'm going to give you a heads up, guys. I'm taking the Super Bowl off, but I will be back tomorrow night with more. Ciao for now.